there's a dark truth hidden inside Carl Jung's shadow work that almost no one talks about. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you'll discover the one thing about shadow integration that most people completely miss, and how ignoring it can quietly sabotage your entire life. By the end, you won't just understand Jung's shadow work, you'll know exactly how to apply it to unlock your hidden power, heal old wounds, and stop repeating the same destructive patterns. Let's dive in. Before we dive into the dark truth, we need to understand exactly what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of the shadow. Too often, people misunderstand this concept. They think the shadow is simply the bad part of themselves, the anger, the jealousy, the envy, the shame. But Jung's idea of the shadow was much more complex, much more uncomfortable, and much more important. The shadow, Jung explained, is everything about ourselves that we reject, repress, or deny. It's not only our darkness, but also our unlived potential. It's the parts of your personality that don't fit the image you present to the world. Maybe as a child, you were told not to be too loud, too ambitious, too assertive, so you buried those traits. Or perhaps you were shamed for crying, for being sensitive, for expressing emotions. So you pushed that side of yourself down as well. All of that, the anger, the vulnerability, the hidden talents, even the forgotten dreams, lives inside your shadow. Jung put it very clearly in one of his most famous lines: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that for a moment. As long as you refuse to look at your shadow, it's not gone. It doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It controls you from the dark. The shadow lives in your unconscious, pulling the strings of your behavior, shaping your relationships, guiding your choices, all while you convince yourself that you're in control. In reality, you're being guided by impulses, fears, and wounds that you never faced. This is why shadow work is so crucial. It's not a trendy self-help tool. It's not about just thinking positive or ignoring your flaws. Shadow work is the brutal process of looking into the mirror without filters, without masks, without pretending to be someone you're not. It's the willingness to see every hidden corner of your psyche, even the parts you'd rather keep buried forever. Jung believed that true healing, true transformation, and true authenticity can only come when you stop running from your darkness and face it directly. And here's the paradox: the shadow isn't only destructive. Inside it lies everything you've repressed, which also means the gifts you've abandoned. Maybe you were taught to repress your creativity because it wasn't practical. Maybe you silenced your confidence because others called it arrogance. Maybe you buried your passion because society told you it was too risky. All of these rejected aspects live in the shadow. They are not gone. They are waiting. Shadow work is the act of reclaiming them. So when Jung speaks of the shadow, he's not just warning us about evil or darkness. He's reminding us that we are incomplete without the parts of ourselves we've cast away. Shadow work is the art of becoming whole again, of integrating both the light and the dark. And this is why it feels so dangerous, because it requires you to admit that you are not only who you think you are also everything you've tried not to be. To work with the shadow, you must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths, your hidden resentments, your secret desires, your unspoken fears. You must ask yourself questions that cut deep. Why do I judge others so harshly? What am I jealous of? What triggers my anger? What do I hide from everyone else? Each of these questions pulls something out of the dark, something you've avoided facing until now. This is why Jung compared shadow work to a kind of inner alchemy. Just as alchemists sought to transform lead into gold, shadow work transforms the weight of repression into the light of awareness. When you face the shadow, you no longer live as a puppet of your unconscious. You become the one in control, and suddenly, What once felt like weakness becomes strength. What once felt like chaos becomes clarity. And what once felt like fate becomes freedom. In simple terms, shadow work is the process of seeing yourself without illusions. It is the most radical form of self-honesty. It is the moment you stop asking, "Who do I want people to think I am?" and instead ask, "Who am I really when no one is watching?" That is the beginning of power. That is the beginning of transformation. And that is why Jung insisted that every human being, no matter how successful or spiritual they appear, must one day face their shadow or remain forever controlled by it. Most people who hear the term shadow work think it is something gentle, healing, or even glamorous. They imagine that it is simply about healing old wounds, releasing trauma, or finding your inner light. On social media, shadow work is often reduced to journaling prompts, positive affirmations, or a kind of psychological self-care ritual. But Carl Jung never intended it to be something so simple or so safe. Jung warned that when we truly confront the shadow, we are not just opening the door to old pain. We are meeting aspects of ourselves that we would rather never admit exist. This is the dark truth that almost nobody notices. When you begin to descend into your own shadow, you will not only encounter the parts of yourself that feel wounded or vulnerable, you will also come face to face with parts of your psyche that are cruel, selfish, manipulative, and even destructive. These elements live inside of all human beings, whether we want to admit it or not. Jung once wrote that the evil that people see in the world is only a reflection of the evil they refuse to recognize within themselves. In other words, the horrors of human history, the cruelty of war, violence, and betrayal, all of these collective shadows are made possible because individuals repress their own darkness and then project it outward. That is why genuine shadow work is not simply a journey into healing, it is also a confrontation with the possibility of one's own capacity for harm. Think about it. When you feel jealous, when you feel rage, when you feel the impulse to manipulate someone to get what you want. These are not just bad moods. They are glimpses of the shadow, and if you deny them, they grow stronger in the unconscious, waiting to erupt in ways you cannot control. The reason Jung emphasized the danger of ignoring the shadow is because when the unconscious is left unexamined, it does not disappear. It governs your actions from behind the scenes. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But here is the uncomfortable part. To make the unconscious conscious, you must be willing to admit to yourself that you are not only capable of good, but also capable of evil. And that terrifies most people. This is the problem with the way modern culture has diluted shadow work. People want the light without the darkness. They want healing without responsibility. They want wisdom without sacrifice. They journal about their pain, but they do not dare to face the monster that lives in their own heart. And so, their shadow work becomes a fantasy, a spiritual hobby rather than a transformation. Real shadow work is like staring into a mirror that shows you everything you don't want to see. Your envy, your rage, your lust, your greed, your cowardice, your hidden aggression. Jung believed that the shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a force to be integrated. But that integration is only possible if you have the courage to look honestly at the most frightening parts of yourself. The irony is that when people refuse this confrontation, they end up living out the shadow in unconscious ways. The person who insists they are always kind may secretly harbor resentment that leaks out in passive-aggressive behavior. The one who claims to be pure and spiritual may secretly crave power and domination. The man who denies his weakness may project it onto others, seeing weakness everywhere around him while pretending he himself is strong. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." The more you deny your darkness, the more it grows behind you. So the problem nobody notices is not that shadow work is too difficult. It's that most people are not doing it at all. They are pretending. They are polishing the mask of spirituality or self-improvement while keeping the true darkness locked away. But the shadow cannot be silenced forever. It leaks into your relationships, your work, your decisions. It emerges in the way you sabotage your own life, in the way you betray your own values, in the way you hurt the people closest to you. And so, Jung insisted, if you want to live a life of authenticity, if you want to have true freedom, you cannot bypass the darkness within. You must walk into it. You must face what you fear about yourself. That is the path of real shadow work, and it is far more terrifying and far more powerful than what most people imagine. If shadow work is so important, why do so many people abandon the process halfway? The answer is simple: fear. When people begin to look into the depths of their own unconscious, they often discover things they were never prepared to face. It is not just the old childhood pain or feelings of inadequacy. It is the raw power of desires, impulses, and aggression that they have spent their entire lives denying. Jung himself warned that the path of shadow work is not without danger. One of the greatest risks is becoming too identified with the shadow to the point where you are no longer integrating it, you are serving it. Instead of gaining self-awareness, you become possessed by the very forces you were trying to understand. Take the example of someone who uncovers their repressed aggression. For years, they may have believed themselves to be a peaceful person, always avoiding conflict, always swallowing their anger. When shadow work begins, the dam breaks, and suddenly they feel this rush of raw energy. At first, it feels liberating, but without balance, this person may swing to the opposite extreme. Instead of integrating their anger, they begin lashing out at others, exploding in rage, or even using their aggression as a weapon. What was meant to be a process of integration becomes possession. The shadow takes the driver's seat. This is why Jung emphasized that shadow work must always be approached with caution and humility. He wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." In other words, the higher you want to grow spiritually or psychologically, the deeper you must be willing to descend into the darkness within yourself. But those roots, that descent, must be stabilized, not glorified. The danger lies in mistaking the shadow for your true identity. You are not only your anger, you are not only your lust, you are not only your envy. These are fragments, not the whole. But when people discover these fragments, the shock can make them believe, this is who I really am. And in that moment, they lose perspective. Jung called this inflation, when the unconscious overwhelms the ego and the individual becomes consumed by an archetypal force. Instead of working with the shadow, they are swallowed by it. Think of the countless examples in history where brilliant minds, artists, or leaders began exploring their own depths but ended up destroyed by them. They uncovered the power of their shadow but could not balance it. The result was not transformation, but self-destruction. This is why real shadow work is not about celebrating darkness, nor is it about denying it. It is about recognition and balance. Imagine holding fire in your hands. Fire can warm, illuminate, and give life, but it can also burn, consume, and destroy. The shadow is like that fire. If you repress it, it smolders beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. If you glorify it, you risk setting your entire life ablaze. Only when you learn to hold it carefully, to use it wisely, can it become a source of power instead of destruction. Jung's psychology teaches us that every quality in the shadow has a dual nature. Aggression can become cruelty, but it can also become courage. Desire can become obsession, but it can also become creativity. Fear can paralyze, but it can also sharpen awareness. The task of shadow work is not to eliminate these forces, but to transform them, to integrate them into a conscious, balanced self. But the transformation is never easy. Jung observed that many people retreat at this stage of the journey. They sense the danger of being overtaken by their shadow, and so they flee back to comfort, to denial, to distraction. Others rush forward recklessly, glorifying the darkness they find, wearing it like a crown, and boasting of their authenticity, while in truth they are enslaved. Both paths miss the point. The real work is subtle. It requires the discipline to hold contradictions within yourself. You are both capable of love and capable of cruelty. You are both divine and destructive. To integrate the shadow is to stop lying to yourself about either side. This is why Jung compared the psychological journey to the growth of a tree. A tree cannot reach into the heavens unless its roots penetrate the soil, down into the darkness of the earth. The greater the light you seek, the deeper the darkness you must be willing to acknowledge. But those roots do not define the tree. They support it. They are hidden underground, providing nourishment, while the branches stretch upward into the sky. Likewise, your shadow does not define who you are. It supports your growth by grounding you in reality, reminding you of your limitations, your impulses, your humanity. To deny it is to remain shallow. To glorify it is to rot from within. To balance it is to grow toward wholeness. So the question is, how does true integration of the shadow actually happen? Carl Jung made it clear. This is not about theories or reading books alone. Integration requires radical self-awareness. It demands the courage to turn your attention inward again and again, especially in the moments when you least want to. The first step is to observe your emotional triggers. Every time you feel an exaggerated reaction, sudden anger, jealousy, fear, or resentment, that is your shadow speaking. Those reactions are not random. They are the unconscious trying to reveal itself to you. When someone irritates you disproportionately, ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? What does it reveal about me? Most people point the finger outward. Jung's method is to turn the finger inward. One of the most practical tools for this is keeping a shadow journal. Write down the situations that activate you. When you felt envy scrolling through social media, when you felt anger in a conversation, when you felt rejected or insecure. By recording these patterns, you begin to map your unconscious. Over time, you will see repeated themes, the same wounds, the same fears, the same hidden desires showing up in different forms. That is your shadow revealing its shape. Another powerful practice is self-reflection through projection. Jung often said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The qualities you harshly criticize in others are often disowned parts of yourself. If you constantly judge people as arrogant, maybe you are disowning your own need to assert yourself. If you despise greed in others, maybe you are afraid of your own hunger for power or success. The people who trigger you are not random enemies. They are mirrors, showing you what you have rejected within yourself. Meditation can also help you sit with these realizations without being overwhelmed by them. Instead of immediately acting on emotions, you create space to observe them. When jealousy arises, breathe and ask, what does this teach me about what I truly want? When anger surges, ask, what boundary is being crossed that I've been too afraid to enforce? Meditation creates distance between you and the storm, allowing insight to emerge where reaction once ruled. But shadow work is not only about facing pain, it is also about transforming pain into wisdom. Every shadow contains not only wounds, but also hidden potential. The anger you repress can become the courage to defend yourself and others. The envy you hide can point to your deepest ambitions. The fear you bury can sharpen your awareness and push you to grow. In other words, the shadow contains talents disguised as flaws. When you bring them into consciousness, you reclaim lost energy and become more whole. This is why Jung saw integration not as suppression, but as alchemy. You take the raw material of your darkness, rage, fear, shame, desire, and you refine it, transforming it into strength, clarity, and compassion. The very qualities that once controlled you become tools in your hands. True integration is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. A person who has faced their shadow is not someone without anger, fear, or envy. It is someone who can recognize these forces, own them, and choose consciously how to act. They are no longer driven blindly by the unconscious. They are aware, and this awareness is freedom, because once you can look your shadow in the eye without denying it, without being possessed by it, you are no longer its prisoner. You become the master of your inner world. This is why shadow work, when done with honesty and discipline, leads to resilience, authenticity, and deeper connection to life. You stop pretending to be only light and instead embrace your totality. And in that wholeness lies power. The dark truth about Jung's shadow work is this: it's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Most people run from their darkness, but the ones who face it discover freedom, strength, and authenticity. If you made it this far, you already know you're one of those few. Now the choice is yours. Will you keep ignoring the shadow, or will you step into it and claim your true power? If this resonated, make sure to subscribe and join me, because the next video will go even deeper into the hidden wisdom of Carl Jung and the secrets of the unconscious mind.